Hey, friends, welcome into the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. You can find the podcast at Pack a Day Podcast. Thank you so much for being here today. We're going to be talking Packers rookies primarily today, not just what we've seen so far in OTAs. It's only been a couple practices. We're going to go over that, but also what are the expectations for playing time when it comes to these rookies in 2025? We're going to break that down. Plus, we've got some other news and notes that I want to discuss as well. As always, thank you again for being here. And I just want to let you know, too, if you are enjoying the podcast, which I hope that you are, make sure to like, subscribe, comment, give those 5-star reviews. But you can also find us over on the Pack a Day radio show, Monday through Friday on the Fan, 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Central Time. You can find us 1250 a.m., 105.7 FM, but also on the free Odyssey app and on thefanmilwaukee.com. Also, Bleacher Report app. You can find me there Monday through Thursday, 3 p.m. to 3:30 p.m. Central Time as well. There's always a ton of stuff going on from a Packers perspective, so there's always plenty of topics to go over. So Pack a Day Podcast audio, Pack a Day Podcast on YouTube, Pack a Day radio show, and then, of course, you can find me on that Bleacher Report app as well. I know there's some of you that are checking out all of those things, and again, whether you're here for a little bit of it, all of it, I always appreciate the support, and thank you so much for checking out our show today. Before we get into our main event, talking about those Packers rookies, there are a few news, notes, updates, and things that I want to discuss. First, I want to start with a couple of updates from post-practice on Tuesday, a couple things that we learned from the media scrum that I didn't have the opportunity to talk about yesterday. Let's start with Lucas Van Ness. LVN talked about him having a hand injury this past year. We knew that, of course, he had a little bit of a cast going on really up until about week 10 of this past season. And it definitely seemed to hamper him in some way. But LVN finally had the ability to kind of address that a little bit. And he did say that it did affect him through the majority of the season. And then even once he did get that cast off, it was just a struggle for him to kind of build trust back up with the thumb. And that's understandable. But for a player that is, relatively raw at the position and was just kind of this ball of clay coming out of college. We know the statistic that he never started in college as a, defensive end at Iowa. For somebody that is kind of going through that, you want obviously everything at your disposal, but you want to certainly be able to get to learn how to use your hands at such a key piece of the position that is your hands and your just ability to kind of keep defenders keep offensive tackles off of you and be able to use those hands either to rip through or get inside on the chest, whatever it might be. Those hands are massively important to a defensive end in the NFL. That clearly, again, hampered him to some extent last year. We have not seen an LVN so far that has been able to piece together all of the tools that he had coming out of college, all of the traits that were clearly evident, and really be able to make him into more than just a solid rotational defensive end. And make no mistake, he is very much a solid rotational defensive end. Talked about this on the members only Q&A yesterday. If you missed that, that is open now to everyone out there. But there are 32 teams that even if you told them LVN was not going to get an ounce better in his career moving forward, there are 32 teams that would take LVN on their roster right now. No question about it. He is good enough to be any team's fourth or fifth defensive end / outside linebacker / rotational edge player, whatever you want to call it. He is worthwhile for that spot. No question. But Green Bay did not draft him to be a rotational edge piece, right? They want him to be a dominant starter. And in order to do that, he's going to have everything at his disposal, including the ability to use his hands the way that I'm sure he and his defensive line coach would like him to utilize them. And of course, DeMarcus Covington coming in fresh, being somebody that is hopefully going to be able to unlock some of these defensive players. But we learned yesterday again that Kenny Clark was dealing with a lot of stuff, specifically with his foot this past year, LVN with his hand. That is going to matter. How much that matters remains to be seen. Whether or not now with the full use of his hands and the thumb not bothering him, if that's going to unlock LVN in a new way, I don't know. My guess is probably not in and of itself. But whether that, along with year 3 with a new defensive end coach and just maybe, again, a little bit more experience, can that all together maybe make it so that LVN has a better year this year? Sure, hopefully. I'm sort of taking it right now with LVN in two different ways. The first thing that I will say is that anyone that's just ready to give up on LVN and say, screw that guy, he's a bust, he's not going to work out, I don't understand that. As I mentioned, he's already a serviceable rotational defensive end. No question about it. But on top of that, there are still so many traits for you to work with. And I'm looking this up right now. Lucas Van Ness is still all of 23 years old. 23 years old. Now, Baron Sorrell, right, is I think 22. Yeah, he's 22. He's a year younger, and they just drafted him in the 4th round. Colin Oliver is 22 years old and will turn 23 in September. LVN will turn 24 in July, but still, the point remains there are players in this draft class, not necessarily for Green Bay, but in this draft class at defensive end that are older than Lucas Van Ness, which is pretty remarkable. If LVN could have been in this draft class from an age standpoint, and he would have been quite arguably a pretty early 1st round pick once again. So to give up on him at this point, or to say he's a for sure bust, or to say anything like that, I think is beyond ridiculous. I will also readily admit that the 2 years of what we've seen from LVN so far have been underwhelming, have not been, up to the expectation of what you would expect from a player that's drafted that highly and that had all of those gifts coming out of college, whether he started at Iowa or not. So I am taking it of the mind of that he's a solid player, but as far as any sort of significant breakout, I'm kind of just taking it as I'll believe it when I see it. I do think he'll be better. I do think that there is an opportunity for him to break out in a major way, but these things are fickle. A lot of times these players, I'm not saying they are completely who they are. They're a finished product when they come out, but these big jumps, it's just rare that you see them with any level of real consistency, whether it's in year 3 or 4, but it's not like we haven't seen them in the past. So I'm hopeful. I'm optimistic. I do think he's a solid player already, but what that jump looks like and when that happens, or if it happens, that I'm more taking let's take it one step at a time. And that's all there is to it. So I'm still, again, very optimistic, hopeful, and let's see if with the thumb healthy, with a new defensive line coach, and with all of those things, and just him being a year older, a year wiser, now in year 3, almost 24 years old. He'll turn 24 in July. Let's see if he just performs a little bit better this upcoming season and can be that starter opposite Rashawn Gary that, of course, not only the Packers, but I'm sure LVN is hoping for as well. And certainly the fans are hoping for that. Meanwhile, Colby Wooden is another player that we got a little bit of an update on that was in the Kenny Clark interview that I did not recognize. Kenny Clark stated that Colby Wooden has been learning nose tackle for Green Bay, which I guess is surprising, but maybe not super surprising. The only reason I say that it's not super surprising is because he has been taking Kenny's place on the defensive line in OTA so far. Justice and I talked about it, and he's like, well, was he at nose? And I'm like, I don't think so. Again, it was more obvious passing downs and things like that that we saw. There hasn't been a lot of rundowns and things. So I hadn't paid a whole lot of attention to it, but he has been taking Kenny's place overall on the defensive line. Now, what's interesting about Wooden, and as Justice has talked about, this is a player that had to put on weight even just last year, just to give him a little bit of a better chance as like a run defender, certainly nowhere near as like a primary run defender at all. And he's still listed on Packers.com as at 273 pounds. You're clearly not going to play nose tackle at 273 pounds. I don't care what sort of bizarro scheme that you're playing. If you're trying to be more penetrating, getting upfield, whatever, that's just sort of a non-starter. Now, we know that Colby Wooden put on weight this past year. I think he's probably closer in like the 290s. And if he put on a little bit more weight this year, and maybe he's closer into like the 305s, 310s, could he be in that conversation? Sure. I think this is not the worst idea in the world. Colby Wooden as a 3 technique was not necessarily somebody that was super explosive or dynamic in getting into the backfield and causing that havoc and causing that chaos. So maybe put on a little bit more weight and see if you can become a better run defender and maybe play a little bit more of a role that way. I'm very intrigued to see how this plays out. If it's much ado about nothing and it's just like, hey, he's getting some time there, or if this is a way to utilize Colby Wooden in another way and maybe unlock a part of his game that we just haven't seen before. I'll just say I'm intrigued. I don't know what it looks like in its entirety. I am curious to know what his playing weight is at right now. And I think going into minicamp next week, and if there is an opportunity, to ask Matt LaFleur, I am going to ask him definitely about that, or even one of the, coordinators, defensive line coaches, etc., because I am very intrigued as to what that looks like for Colby Wooden moving forward and what their vision is for him. Just remember, Jeff Hafley, when asked about the defensive tackles, was very bullish on what these defensive tackles could be. And he brought up Wooden as one of those guys. Wooden's been ahead of Carl Brooks in just some of the rotation so far. This is a player that I thought coming into camp the offseason was going to really have to battle for his job. We'll see if that's the case with Brinson and Stackhouse or if Wooden just makes it. But again, very intrigued as to what this means for Wooden moving forward. And then the other one was Keyshawn Nixon. He was asked the question again of like, are you still open to returning kickoffs? And he said, yes, what's best for the team, all those sort of things. What you would expect at this time of year. You could tell that there was frustration at the end of last year when they lost. And he, of course, had the big fumble and said he wanted to focus on being a corner. Listen, Keyshawn still has a lot of value potentially as a kick returner, especially with the new kick return rules as well, with the ball being placed at the 35 instead of the 30. There should be more kick returns this year. And if Keyshawn Nixon gives you the best opportunity, which there's reason to believe that he could, then yeah, I think you probably want him at least in some instances back there. And it's great to know that Keyshawn Nixon is still willing to do that. I'm not sure it would have mattered either way. If the Packers said go back and do it, I don't think he would have been insubordinate by any means. But the fact that he's more than open to it still is definitely a win if Green Bay wants to use him in that situation. Speaking of which, and as we kind of transition to rookies a little bit here, I saw some people post both on social media and in the YouTube comments of like, why is Matthew Golden back there as a kick returner and a punt returner? What are we possibly doing here? This doesn't make any sense. I couldn't disagree more. This is something that when you're a rookie in this league, just like Jaden Reed a couple of years ago as a second round pick, you're not to the point yet of being protected as like a number one guy where you're off of punt return and kick return because you're just too valuable. We're also a little bit past that standpoint to some extent where Xavier McKinney is playing special team snaps every now and again. And, Edgerrin Cooper was playing special team snaps this past year. And it wouldn't stun me and shock me if those things continued. I just think that teams are important. And you can't just have this mentality of, well, we're going to use our bottom, 20 guys as our core special teamers. It's evolved past that. And you're going to have a bad special teams if that's what you continue to do. I'm not saying that Matthew Golden, needs to be out there as a punt returner, as a kick returner, but you certainly try him and see what he's capable of. And there could be situations in which it makes sense, or just in general, let's say Mecole Hardman does not make this team. You don't want to keep that sixth receiver. And if Matthew Golden is truly legitimately the best punt returner on the roster as a rookie, by all means, put him back there. Reggie Bush as a rookie, was a full-time kick returner, punt returner. And he was the second overall pick in the draft. At some point, you draft players to be playmakers. You're going to get the ball in the hands of your playmakers as much as you can. And if Matthew Golden has the ability to bust a punt return or a kick return and be a dynamic playmaker in that regard, are you not going to throw him a bubble screen because he's going to have the ability to potentially get hit on that play? No, you're still going to throw him that bubble screen. So I don't have any more worry of him as a punt returner, as a kick returner, or things like that. I think you give him those opportunities. And if he is the best at it, by all means, put him back there. Now, in a year or two, or even if this year, if like all of a sudden he becomes like the clear, non-questioned number one wide receiver, and he is just that valuable where you just cannot risk it at all, okay, we can have that conversation. But right now, before he's even played it down in the NFL, to be like, nope, no way, don't put him at punt returner, don't put him at kick returner, I don't see that whatsoever. Let him see what he can do. And maybe he's one of the more dynamic kicker punt returners in the NFL. At least give him that chance first and see what you have there, and then see what the risk reward is. And that's the thing too. Like if he's just like an average kick returner or punt returner, then do you need him back there? No, like give somebody else that opportunity and don't put Matthew Golden in. But if he's the best, if he's your best kick returner or best punt returner, well, then it's definitely at least worth a conversation. But you're not going to know unless you give him some opportunities back there to see what he's capable of. And again, you don't even know if he's this super dynamic kick returner, punt returner, or wide receiver. Like his best trait might end up being a kick returner, punt returner. I think that would be a pretty big shock and a stunning, awful development, but you just don't know until you put these players out there and give them the opportunity. So I have no issue with that whatsoever. And by the way, the kick return, punt return battle, I think they're going to be really fun. I think at punt returner, you've got Keyshawn Nixon, Jaden Reed, Matthew Golden, Mecole Hardman, just to name a few. At kick returner, We've already seen, Hardman, Nixon, and Golden. And I do think Savion Williams, once he is, done with the red jersey, could easily get his name in the conversation. Marshawn Lloyd's another one that I think would fit very well back there. So I think these kick return and punt return battles have the ability to be very interesting, very intriguing. And I, for one, would not rule anything out at the moment, and let your playmakers go out there and make plays. And if that's Golden or any of these other guys, I'm totally cool with them being back there at kick returner or punt returner if the value is worth it and if they're that dynamic in the return game one way or the other, or in either phase or the other. A couple other just really quick notes. The Packers games against the Jets and the Seahawks in preseason will be broadcast nationally in NFL Network. So if you are a non-local Packers fan that's hoping to get a glimpse at those preseason games, good news for you. Jets and Seahawks both will be primary games on NFL Network. And then last but not least, Browns Midwest area scout Dan Zeggers is coming home to Green Bay. He was a former Packers scouting assistant. He also went to school at De Pere High School and college at St. Norbert College in De Pere. So kind of a cool story there as to what he can bring to Green Bay. I don't know. Again, we don't get all 22 of what these scouts are doing or who they're recommending, who they're not recommending, but he's an experienced NFL scout. Again, Browns Midwest area scout. He now comes back to Green Bay, and I'm sure he's excited that he gets to work for the team that he worked with previously, and I'm sure was a hometown fan of as a resident of the Green Bay area, or primarily De Pere, I guess I should say. All right, with that, let's get to our main topic for today, which are these Packers rookies. We're going to start by going over just a rookie report from what we've seen in OTAs over the first couple weeks. And then we're going to go over, more importantly, what our expectations should be for playing time for these rookies in 2025. Let's start with the rookie report, which unfortunately is relatively simple because a lot of these rookies either are not playing or they're at just positions that we can't glean a ton from so far. We'll start with Matthew Golden. We'll just kind of go in order. We've talked about it. I talked about it at both OTA recaps. Everything is advertised so far, if not even a little bit better. The burst is there. The acceleration's there. The ability to vary speeds within the routes. The hands look much more natural, I think, even in person than what you saw with the 9.4% drop rate. Primarily, that was in Houston and not at Texas. But I just think he looks very natural doing just about everything, whether it's the punt catches, whether it's the kick return catches, whether it's, I would say punt returning and kick returning, but it's not live punt return or kick return reps so far. But he looks natural in the receiving ability of that. Plucking the ball out of the air as a receiver. Again, the route running, it all just comes smoothly and naturally to him. And that is what has stood out so far. And then, of course, that speed is legit. I don't know what Matthew Golden, I guess we haven't seen any like explosive plays from Golden so far. So that maybe is like just the next step, even in minicamp next week, is like, can he get that 30, 40 yard play down the field? You would love to see that. But just how he's gone about everything, and again, passing the eye test and just having the scouting report match what we've seen on the field so far, everything is as advertised. And that's all you can ask for. Again, it does not mean success moving forward, but it is certainly better than the alternative where you're like, it's 4.240 speed on the watch, but it just doesn't look that way in person, or, you're not really seeing some of the nuance in the route running. It would be a bummer if that were the case. And that just is not so far. Very, very pleased with what I've seen. And he is everything that you would expect him to be as a rookie for OTAs. We'll see what that means when the pads come on, and then we get to the regular season and beyond. As far as Anthony Belton goes, this is, again, another one of those players that is at a position that you just can't tell a whole heck of a lot. It's interesting that he's been at tackle so far. So there's been no real experimentation with him, at least not a bunch that I can remember at guard. I think he's primarily been at tackle from everything that I've seen. Maybe a few reps at guard here or there that maybe I missed, but primarily he's been at tackle. The big thing here, literally the big thing, is once again the size and agility of Belton matches what we saw on tape, matches what we saw coming out of college. He is a big dude that can move. I've already seen him on plays where he's pulling to the outside. I've seen him on plays where he needs to use that agility to get to the second level, and it's all there. What that again equates to as him getting into conversations of, can he play and get snaps in year one? Does he move inside to right guard to get into that competition? Those things remain to be seen. And how he looks when the pads come on, my guess is he's going to look even bigger. But I just love where he's at from coming into the league standpoint, from a height, weight, speed profile. And then, of course, there's going to be things that you're going to be working on. I'll also just say this. I've seen a lot of times in the past where these rookies come in and they're starting to play, and Butkus is just immediately after them, like with their technique and things like that, or just saying like this is not how you do it, or like this, you see, I haven't really seen that so far. Not to say that he's a finished product or that Butkus isn't going to do that eventually. That probably will 100% happen, but I feel like he's off to a pretty good start just from like he's still raw. He's a rookie, whatever, but just his general technique, I don't think it's in this like completely no man's land situation either, complete no man's land situation. So I think there's enough to work with there. And I'm very excited to see if he does get into one of those competitions come training camp. But for now, again, height, weight, speed is advertised, and evaluating anything beyond that in OTAs is just probably a little bit foolhardy at the moment.
Hey friends, I'm so excited to tell you about this new game-changing product that I've been using before a big night out. It's called pre-alcohol. Now, ZBiotics pre-alcohol prebiotic drink is the world's first genetically engineered prebiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's a buildup of that byproduct, not dehydration. That's to blame for rough days after drinking. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down, so just remember to make pre-alcohol your first drink of the night, to drink responsibly, and you'll feel your best tomorrow. Now listen, I get it. I was a bit skeptical about pre-alcohol initially myself, but I've now used it for a bachelor party, the college basketball tournament, and recently for a friend's epic 40th birthday party, and I'm telling you, it's the real deal. And guess what? Summer's here, which means more opportunities to celebrate the warm weather. And before that backyard barbecue brew, the glass of Pinot watching the sunset at the beach, or a cocktail by the campfire, do not forget your ZBiotics pre-alcohol. Drink one before drinking and wake up feeling great and ready to take on the next day and all that summer has to offer. So go to zbiotics.com/packaday to learn more and get 15% off your first order when you use code packaday. ZBiotics is backed with a 100% money back guarantee. So if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/packaday and use code packaday at checkout for 15% off. Make sure to support our sponsors and use that code PACKADAY.
Savion Williams, once again, height, weight, speed, the explosion is there. You can see it. And then, of course, the double catch was posted on social media the other day. Funny story behind that. You can check out the members only Q&A if you want to hear that. But no, this is somebody that definitely matches the description of what he was coming out of college as well. Unfortunately, with the red jersey, we have not seen him in any of the real team drills or anything like that. So it's just kind of going through the individuals, but the individual stuff matches everything, even up to the double catch, right? But the profile, the height, again, what we would expect with the speed and agility within that, it's rare, it's unique. It's not something that you see every day. I'm very interested to see what that looks like in team drills. I'm hoping that the red jersey comes off, hopefully even maybe next week for mini camps. I would love to see a little bit more of him. He's got his work cut out from him with this depth chart at wide receiver right now where it is, and him just being a little bit more raw. But everything that you would want from a, just trait standpoint is oozing. It's all there. Now it's just, can you put together a fully functional wide receiver when it comes to route running and cutting out of his breaks and the hands and all of that sort of stuff? I think that's going to be a little bit of a work in progress, but I've liked what I've seen so far from Savion Williams. Baron Sorrell, not, again, a ton that we can glean here, just simply because he is at a position where it's just patty cake at this point. I will say there's been some fun reps between Baron Sorrell and Belton. That's been a fun thing to watch, just with these two big guys that have great athleticism going against each other. Both have had their wins and losses against each other for as well as as much as you can in OTAs. But I think the get off the line of scrimmage is good. Again, he looks like he's got the functional strength. I'm sure he could use a little bit more with time, but it doesn't look like he's completely like a JV player trying to play varsity or anything like that. He looks the part. What that equates to, again, we'll have to wait and see. But I like what I've seen out of Sorrell, and he definitely looks like somebody who can be, similar to Kingsley Enagbari in his rookie year, a rotational piece playing. We'll get to that playing time expectation in just a moment, but I do think he can have a role on defense as soon as the season. Colin Oliver, unfortunately, has been in the rehab group, so no real glimpse at him so far. Same thing with Warren Brinson. Micah Robinson, the biggest thing is in a 2-minute drill in that first OTA, he had a nice pass breakup. I will say again, the speed looks legit. It looks like he is that guy that could play that position with a little bit more speed. I don't think the change of direction has been quite as bad as you would expect, and he does look like a natural fit for Jeff Hafley's defense. But I would say so far the results are good, and that big pass breakup in the 2-minute drill a week ago was definitely noteworthy. No big plays at the second week of OTAs, and didn't get to see a ton of him, but I have been impressed with what I've seen from a speed standpoint from Micah Robinson so far. And then unfortunately, John Williams has not been at either of the first OTAs. We don't know the reason why as of yet, but he is somebody that I'm still very excited about based on his draft profile, but we have seen literally none of him outside of just seeing him in person at rookie minicamp. Taylor Algersma, I like the live arm. Amar Johnson, he's got the bulk to go with, the I don't know if I want to say like speed at the position, but he definitely is somebody that's got a little bit more size to him at that position, which outside of Josh Jacobs, I guess you have Emmanuel Wilson too, but it's just a little bit of a different body type than you're seeing from some of these other running backs. So a little bit intrigued. We got to see him used a little bit as a kick returner as well. Same thing with Jalen White. Tyler Cooper, I gave the story of just like you can tell, he's got the great attention to detail. That first week of OTAs, just trying to get the footwork right and was double checking with his coaches to make sure he was doing it the right way, what he was doing wrong, those sort of things. So I just love that attention to detail and that desire to be better. Cooper showed that to me immediately. Sam Brown looks the part, but had that big drop in the 2-minute drill in the OTAs this week. Nazir Stackhouse, wearing number 93 gives off some TJ Slayton vibes. I think you're probably looking a little bit more like Jonathan Ford, the 7th rounder from these past couple seasons in Green Bay. We'll see if he can get himself in that conversation for being more of that run stuffer, nose tackle type of player. But from a size standpoint, he looks it. Now, just can he put the anchor ability and the ability to use his hands and not get kind of pushed around like sometimes he did in college? That's going to be paramount to his success in Green Bay. Jamon Johnson had the interception that either Daniel Whalen or Brandon McManus threw in the fake field goal the other day. Outside of that, haven't seen really anything from him. And then Jonathan Baldwin has been getting some reps with the cornerback group. There was some question as to whether or not it would be safety or corner. It has been at corner. I would like to see a little bit more, meaning I haven't had the opportunity to get eyes on him a ton, but am intrigued with what he can bring to the table as one of the UDFAs that they spent the most money on. As far as playing time expectations go for 2025, with Matthew Golden, I think you can look at some of these rookie just receiving snaps from these Packers over the past couple seasons and start to piece together the puzzle a little bit. Romeo Doubs as a rookie played 529 snaps. Christian Watson played 507. Dontavian Wicks played 516, and Jaden Reed played 645. And I think that's really what you're probably looking at for Matthew Golden here, somewhere between 500 and 600 snaps if he stays healthy. First of all, I don't think you need more than that. You have a pretty solid group of wide receivers that give you a ton of depth and versatility. Plus, you've got Christian Watson coming back at some point. I don't think you need to throw everything at him. I don't think you need to play him 700, 800, 900 snaps. I think right around 500 to 600 is going to give him a really good base for what you can, play him in year one, where he continues to learn the position, maybe gives you some reps on special teams as well, either as a kick returner, punt returner, or other. And I think that's a great spot for him to be in. If he can handle more than that, I think there's a good chance that he can, sure. But if I were putting a bet on it, I would say probably somewhere in that 550 to 650 range. And I think that would be the right amount of snaps to play him this year. Of course, if there's an injury issue or something like that, it could be less. But I do expect that he's going to have an impact on this team from day one. I would expect, solid 30, 40 snaps from Matthew Golden at wide receiver as soon as week one. And I do think that he's willing and able to handle that type of load. I would expect a legit role for Matthew Golden from game one and then through the remainder of the season. But just, again, making sure that it's limited to the point where you don't need to drag him into the ground or, put too much on his plate in year one, because you have all the great depth at wide receiver already. But I think you're going to see a significant role for Matthew Golden right away. Anthony Belton's tougher. Last year, Jordan Morgan as a first-round pick had 186 snaps, but a lot of that was due to him having injuries. Sean Ryan as a rookie third-rounder had 0 snaps as a rookie, but a lot of that was coming in camp out of shape and then, of course, getting suspended at the end of that year. It's really tough. You have 6 guys that at minimum are probably going to start ahead of Belton just on the depth chart, right? You've got your 5 starters, Walker, Banks, Jenkins, and then Sean Ryan and Zach Tom. And then you've got Jordan Morgan as the 6th guy. So probably at best, he's number 7. I do think he's going to probably get snaps just based on injuries at some point. And even without that, I do think he probably gets some sort of rotational role sometime during the season just to get him some reps out on the field, knowing that he's probably going to be needed in 2026. But I would put it probably around 200 to 300 snaps. And even that might feel a little bit high. There's a world in which he gets none if your offensive line stays healthy and you don't want to rotate him in, and just Sean Ryan and those guys are playing well. You're probably not looking at him getting a ton of snaps. But if there are injuries, or if you want to get him some snaps, I think there's a world in which he can do it in year 1. It's just, kind of tough to tell at this point what version of that it's going to be. But I'll say somewhere probably between 200 and 300 snaps for Anthony Belton this upcoming year. And it wouldn't shock me if he got some starting reps, especially if there was an injury to Sean Ryan or someone like that. Could easily see a world in which he gets some reps like that at some point this season. Savion Williams is another really tough one. I talked about this the other day where I think there is a world in which, clearly he's going to make the team. He's like their number 5 wide receiver as a 3rd round pick. He's just a lock to make it. But if you do keep McCole Hardman as a returner, or even a Malik Heath or someone like that, you could see a world in which they are active on game days ahead of Savion Williams, and Savion Williams could be the game day inactive just because some of those other guys might be a little bit more game ready right now. And you're not looking for Savion Williams to probably play a ton as a wide receiver if everyone's healthy, because you have Golden, Wicks, Reed, and Dobbs, and at some point, Christian Watson as well. Savion Williams just could find himself on the outside looking in as a pure wide receiver. And if you're going to have another one active, you're probably looking at special teams a little bit more. Now, Savion Williams can get his, name in the conversation at kick returner, or maybe as like a gunner on special teams somehow. Well, then that changes the story, and you could see him be more active, and then you could get him more snaps on game days, put him more in that gadget role. But I would hypothesize about 200 to 300 snaps this year for Savion Williams. I don't think it's going to be less. I think at some point, whether it's due to injuries or just pure curiosity that you want to get the ball in his hands some and just let him be a little bit more of a playmaker, I think there'll be enough. But I do think there's enough wide receivers on this roster already. And with Christian Watson coming back at some point, I think him getting more than 300 snaps is probably going to be pretty tough. Not impossible, but I wouldn't necessarily bet on it. So I think maybe even somewhere between 100 and 300 is a little bit more likely. And the amount of touches and impact that he can have is probably just a little bit more dependent upon how quickly he can acclimate to the NFL, or if he's just so dynamic in playmaking with the ball in his hands that you just have to activate him and find a way to get the ball in his hands in some way, shape, or form, because he's that talented. If he shows that, then everything's off the table. Like they're going to get him reps. If it's more of like a redshirt season, or like, hey, let's take our time with this guy and not put too much on him too quick, then I could easily see this being somewhere closer to 100 to maybe 150, 200 snaps this upcoming year. Barron Sorrell, Kingsley Enagbare played 465 snaps in 2022 as a 5th round rookie. Brenton Cox played 187 snaps last year in his 2nd year. I think probably somewhere in that 200 to 450 snap range is probably about right. He's going to get in that rotation. I'd be pretty stunned if he doesn't. And there's a world, like we've talked about, where Enagbare maybe isn't back, or you could theoretically go with Gary, LVN, and then probably like Brenton Cox, Barron Sorrell, and Colin Oliver is your 5. You probably have to get something in return for Enagbare in that situation, but because his salary kicked up to over $3 million, it's not completely impossible or infeasible. And if that's the case, like I think you could get to maybe 450, 500 snaps for Sorrell. I think that's where this just gets a little bit more interesting. I think the dynamic of the room and who ultimately makes the team. And then just, we talked about LVN. Is LVN just the unquestioned starter opposite Rashawn Gary, or does he end up being more of a rotational guy? If so, you could have a potential starting battle between Brenton Cox and Kingsley Enagbare and Barron Sorrell to start opposite Rashawn Gary if LVN just isn't ready for that yet, or just doesn't show that he's ready to take that step. So this is a very interesting one, but I think for Sorrell, probably a rotational spot again, somewhere between 200 and 450 snaps this upcoming year. Colin Oliver, I do think is going to play, unless he just is like a bust. Let me rephrase that word a little bit. I'm not saying bust and like you can't use him, but just like they had an idea that he could be a situational pass rusher, and they realized he can't. Right? They're going to have to transition him to off-ball linebacker. If that would be the case, then things change quite a bit, and he's probably closer to under 100 snaps this year. But I think they're going to try him out as a legitimate situational pass rusher. I've said this before, and I'll say it again. look at the former Badger, Nick Herbig for the Pittsburgh Steelers. As a rookie, he played 211 snaps, and as a sophomore this past year, he played 433 snaps. All of those are pretty much as situational pass rusher only. You don't really want him in at rundowns too much, but you can definitely play as a pass rusher and get to the quarterback, and he's done actually a great job of it. If I'm Colin Oliver, if I'm the Green Bay Packers, I'm using that same blueprint, that Herbig has done in Pittsburgh, because he's had great success with it as a rotational piece. I think that's kind of what I would be looking at as well, right around that 200 snap range for Oliver in year one. And then if he shows he can do it better, then more like 400 in year two. But I think that's what he's probably around. And I would use Nick Herbig as sort of my prototype for how I would use Colin Oliver as a rookie and just get him acclimated to the league in that pass rush specialist position. Warren Brinson, TJ Slayton played 266 snaps as a rookie, played 457 snaps a year ago. I think the big thing for Brinson is he's just going to have to make the team first. There's no guarantee. There is a world in which you have Colby Wooden, Carl Brooks, Devontae Wyatt, and Kenny Clark. And then if Stackhouse just ends up being better than Brinson, well, then you just keep Stackhouse and you end up with a rookie one way or the other. I think there's a very, very good chance that Brinson makes the team, but as a 6th-round pick, it's never a lock. And I think that's job number one, is just make the team. And then number two is, even if you make the team, make it not just based on your draft status, but make it on the fact that you're ready to compete and play snaps in year one. I think he's going to. Of course, right now it's just been him in the rehab group, so we don't know what injury is ailing him at the moment. But assuming he can get out there and hopefully not have an injury that lingers into training camp and things like that, I do believe he's going to have the opportunity to play snaps. And I think somewhere between probably 300 and 400 snaps in his rookie season is probably right about right. And especially if you have any injury, he could be counted on even more than that. So I think I'll say somewhere between 200 and 400 snaps for Brinson as a rookie. But it is going to be, of course, very important that he just makes the team first. Micah Robinson, I don't expect much in year one. A lot of this could depend on Jair's return. If Jair's back, there's even less opportunity for him. I think you look at Robert Rochelle, who's been on the roster these past 2 years. Rochelle played 6 snaps in 2023 and 1 snap in 2024. Kind of like Brinson for Robinson, the first things first, you just got to make the team. If you can make the team, show that you can get active on game day due to special teams. And if you can get active on special teams, if there's an injury, then you're going to find yourself on the field. So that's probably the pathway for Robinson, but I'm going to say probably in that Robert Rochelle range of, if he gets on the field, it's probably just a handful of snaps and probably not much more than that, barring a bunch of injuries at the position. John Williams, my prediction would be no snaps. He's going to find himself pretty far on the depth chart. Again, first things first, just has to make the team. Even if he does make the team, it's probably as offensive lineman 8, 9, or 10, probably closer to 9 or 10. And hopefully for Green Bay's standpoint, they don't have to get down to their 9th or 10th offensive lineman at some point this season. As far as undrafted free agents go, Nasir Stackhouse is probably the one that finds himself with the best opportunity to potentially get on the field and actually play snaps as a dedicated run defender. I will still say that it's probably less than 50, and there's a chance that he doesn't even make the team or doesn't even equate into the, calculate into the equation at all this year. So I would probably say 0, but if there is a player as a UDFA that has the ability to get on the field on defense, I would say Nasir Stackhouse, or just on offense or defense. Could a player like Jamon Johnson or Jonathan Baldwin or one of these guys get active and play on teams? Yes, absolutely. But I think if you're looking for snaps on either the offensive or defensive side of the ball, Stackhouse would probably find himself in the best opportunity, but he's going to have to earn that in order to actually get active on game days and then certainly out on the field for any legitimate snaps. All right, that's going to do it for me today. That is sort of your rookie report and expectations going into the season from a snap count standpoint. Still very excited about this rookie class. It's unfortunate that some of these guys are a little bit banged up at the moment with Colin Oliver and Warren Brinson, and that John Williams hasn't been at OTA so far. Hopefully some of these guys can get healthy for minicamp, and we can even update these guys a little bit more. And then once training camp comes around, hopefully everyone's healthy. Hopefully Savion Williams has got that red jersey off. And then we get to see a little bit more from some of the offensive linemen and defensive linemen that you just can't glean as much from OTAs. Shout out to our All-Pro and Hall of Fame members, Most Hated Minnesotan, PJ Wynn, John Wild, Brandon Paletta, Boom Handle, Donald Lee, Lori Lord, Baby QB, David McCluskey, Donald Decker, Alex Wong, Peter Ritaka, Jay Zimmerman, B. Brown, Puerto Rican Packer, Dan Gessford, Dylan Pat Scott, SoCal Pack, Chris Rager, Izzy Roberts, Ian Ewing, Jake Koner, Carlo Delgado, Willie Winkle, Stinkle, Jen Wright, The Gable Storm, Matt Geiger, and Pack Attack Cast. I'll see you guys tomorrow, but until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.